Welcome to my presentation exploring the effects of hair on various aspects of identity. Throughout the coming slides, we will investigate how hair impacts factors such as cultural identity, personal expression of identity, and acts as a determinant of belonging in certain roles, groups, or categories. So hair plays a powerful role in how we express identity, reaching across race, gender, culture, religion, and beyond. It's one of the most visible, recognizable, and meaning-filled parts of our appearance, and it communicates much more than we likely think about in our day-to-day living. Hairstyle, texture, color, visibility, or covering of the hair communicates more than we might realize, and it's more than just self-expression. It becomes a tool with which we access certain social groups, or can become a method of discrimination. While hair might seem like a personal expression of identity, it actually carries significant social and cultural weight. The way we wear our hair can connect us to tradition, community, or be a sign of protest. Hairstyle can also be a target for judgment, discrimination, or even workplace restrictions. Hair contributes to how we navigate our personal identity, how we see ourselves, our social identity, how others see us, and our role identity, how we present ourselves in specific roles. Globally, the grooming industry brings in almost $38 billion a year on hair alone. This shows the significant value we place on appearance and hairstyle specifically. It's about more than an aesthetic. It's about power, identity, and fitting or not fitting into the systems we live in. Now, one of the main reasons I was curious about exploring this topic is because for almost as long as I can remember, I've had very long hair. The last time I cut my hair short to about my shoulders, I was in grade 6, and I like to tell people the story that I'd cut my hair and I had it in a ponytail, and the boy behind me in class told me that my ponytail looked like a squirrel tail. And I kind of used that story to be like, oh, and ever since then I was scarred, and so I decided to grow it out. But really, it actually goes a lot deeper than that. I've noticed that my long hair, has become part of my identity. It's one of the first things that people notice about me. It's one of the first things that a stranger might comment or talk to me about. And so I became curious about this topic to try to understand maybe how my hair impacts my identity in ways even deeper than I currently understand, and also how hair impacts others' identities and our culture and societal identities. So you might not think you spend a lot of time thinking about hair, but these everyday comments and questions on this slide show how much we tend to read into other people's hair, perhaps without even realizing it. Whether it's wondering why it seems like all grandmas cut their hair short. Like, for example, when I was younger, I thought I saw my friend's grandma and she had this long, dark hair, and I was just blown away by the fact that a grandma could have long hair, because my grandmas kept their hair very short, and most grandmas I knew kept their hair very short. So whether it's that or making assumptions about someone with what we have come to call a man bun, or associating a shaved head with an illness, this illustrates how hair becomes a powerful social signal. It triggers judgments and stereotypes, causing us to put people into categories and boxes based on hairstyle. We even sense unspoken social rules about how we supposedly should look according to our age, gender, culture, or social role. The phrase, "I can tell she's a Karen by her haircut," is a great example of how hair can be a symbol of an assumed identity, attitude, or even larger political or social matters. When we ask questions like, are certain hairstyles reserved for certain races? We're really starting to explore what boundaries may exist between cultural expression, identity, and appropriation. So while these may seem like random thoughts or comments, they actually reveal how deeply hair functions as a symbol of identity. Hair helps people express who they are, and leads others to draw conclusions, often without even realizing it. Hair is all around us, and it carries deeper meaning than we even realize. Now, it could seem that hair is a more trivial matter in comparison to other big topics and issues at hand in the world today, but in researching for this presentation, I have come to find it to be far from trivial. Hair has deep roots, no pun intended, historically, developmentally, and aesthetically, and is heavily connected to themes such as self-esteem and aging. Historically, hair has been a symbol of wealth and status. Think of the large, elaborate wigs worn by royalty, nobility, and the wealthy in 18th century Europe. Back then, wigs, and today, styles such as highlights, colors, weaves, and extensions often signify a certain level of wealth, or at least a desire to appear wealthy and polished, since the maintenance of these hairstyles requires significant money and time to upkeep. Developmentally, hair is seen as a sign of good health. Typically, long, natural-colored hair is a sign of youth, and short, gray, or white hair is seen as a sign of aging. In considering aesthetics, some research has suggested that facial attractiveness is even more important in our judgments on overall attractiveness than body type. Along with facial features such as a person's eyes and smile, hair is seen as a top element contributing to the overall perceived attractiveness of a person. Part of self-esteem is the ability to feel in control of one's own life, resulting in greater confidence. As hair is a fairly easy part of our bodies that we can physically alter or change or manipulate, it makes sense that we seek to change and manage our hair in a way that gives us a sense of control of a certain aspect of our lives and sends the message to others that we are well regulated and in control. A polished hairstyle versus an unkept hairstyle seems to say a lot about a person. As we age, hair often thins and changes texture and color. To cope with the changes occurring, the desire for control over the changes being seen as a result of growing older often increases for many people. Hair is one of the most physically obvious ways that we express identity, and it's also one of the ways our identity is most easily interpreted by others. Whether we mean to or not, we may look at someone's hair and begin to make judgments about who we think they are. We may make assumptions about their age, gender, culture, religion, or even their personality. For example, lately I've seen a joke going around the internet talking about how women with blue hair all have the same personality. It's interesting how we use these judgments to form lines, which we then use to define in and out groups. Deborah Rode is a legal scholar who is known for her work discussing the beauty bias, particularly in its relation to how law functions and is upheld. In this quote, Rode says, "The way individuals present themselves to the world often implicates core values and cultural identity. Although most courts regard matters of grooming as relatively insignificant concerns, many individuals see them as central to their personal beliefs and religious, racial, and gender affiliations." Here, she highlights how these grooming choices are often linked to our core values and cultural identity. So while courts or workplaces may claim to see hairstyle as a trivial matter, individuals often see it as deeply meaningful. In the coming slides, we will discuss how hairstyle reflects and is impacted by factors such as racial or cultural identity, gender expression, and more. For example, someone might wear their hair in locks, also known as dreadlocks, as a form of racial pride, or keep their hair covered for religious reasons. Others might dye it or cut it to express gender identity. This is where we must discuss interpretation. While one person might see a hairstyle as expressive or empowering, someone else might stereotype it, judge it, or even try to regulate it. Thus, hair becomes a space where identity is not only expressed, but also categorized and even policed. This shows us that although we may feel that it is, how we wear our hair is never just a personal or trivial choice. It's deeply tied to broader systems of meaning, categorization, and identity. Hair is an important aspect of many people's racial identities and contributes to both the expression and others' interpretation of identity. Here, we will focus specifically on the history of hair and how that contributes to identity for Black individuals. For Black individuals, hair is far more than just a personal style. It's a deeply rooted expression of racial and cultural identity pride, and even resistance. Historically, in pre-colonial Africa, hairstyles communicated social markers like age, religion, marital status, and community rank. Here, hair was a physical communication of other aspects of identity. During enslavement, the connection of hair and identity was severely separated and controlled. Slave owners deliberately shaved the heads of enslaved Africans, stripping them of cultural expression and humanity. Hair was even described in dehumanizing ways like woolly or peppercorn, which reinforced ideas of racial superiority and inferiority. During this time, tools required for the maintenance of black hair, like carved combs, which held tribal significance, were banned. The legacy of these historical traumas lives on. In the 1960s, the afro became a political symbol of the Black Power movement, transforming what was previously seen as bad hair into good hair, and was a sign of rebellion against Eurocentric beauty standards. The natural hair movement that followed was not just about hair or appearance, but about reclaiming power and pride in Black identity. Today, hair continues to function as a site of both racial and cultural connection and self-expression and formation of identity. One study references how in their research, a common theme emerging from the conversation on hair is that of family and tradition. For many, from childhood, hair is embedded deeply into their sense of family and tradition. For example, sitting for hours between a mother or grandmother's legs to have one's hair done is a powerful cultural ritual where care, identity, and belonging are passed down. This family identity contributes to the existence of broader social identities by reinforcing shared cultural practices, values, and language. These early experiences with hair care often shape how individuals see themselves within their community and how they come to understand concepts such as beauty and belonging. As hair is cared for and styled in these intimate, often intergenerational settings, it becomes about more than creating a physical product. It becomes a form of storytelling, heritage, and affirmation of identity. As such, for many, hair is not just a personal choice, but it is a way to access a certain cultural history and collective identity. Now, because Black hair is so visibly tied to identity, it has also become an aspect of the discrimination faced by Black individuals. Hair bias, or hair racism as it's called, is the negative treatment of natural Black hairstyles such as afros, braids, locks, and twists. One prominent example of this is found in the case of Rogers versus American Airlines, where a Black woman challenged the company's ban on cornrows. The court dismissed the case, arguing that cornrows weren't exclusively a Black hairstyle, and called hair a matter of relatively low importance. The problem is, these policies are far from minor and actually represent the racism and discrimination that is so deeply etched into our society. As another example, here in Canada, Latia McNichol, a Black waitress in Montreal, was told by her employer that her braids were not acceptable at work. Her mother responded publicly, saying this wasn't an isolated case, but something the Black community faces much too often. This kind of regulation is not just about hair. It's about who gets to be seen as a professional, respectable, or even employable. It's about access to power. It's important to consider how, because hair is often tied deeply to racial identity, discrimination based on hair goes deeper than a dress code. It reflects deeper biases about who is allowed to access certain roles, places, and spaces, and therefore opportunities in society. Hair is one of the most visible ways that we communicate gender to the world, and it's incredibly prone to assumptions, judgment, and categorization by others. In the quote on this slide, Ricky Wilkins explains that our society has built up deeply embedded social practices that shape how our bodies move through space and how others read and respond to us based on traits such as hair length, hairstyle, and color. From a young age, we learn the generally accepted social norms according to our community or environment. Long hair is for girls and is feminine, short hair is for boys and is masculine. We also hear stereotypes about color. Blonde is seen as playful and attractive. After all, blondes have more fun, right? A shaved head could be read as rebellious or even intimidating, depending on who's wearing it. These aren't biological facts. They're cultural norms that are constructed and reinforced through media, school, workplace policies, and social interactions. In their book, Gender Norms and Intersectionality, Connecting Race, Class, and Gender, Wilkins, a transgender woman, reminds us that gender norms impact everyone, not just those identifying as LGBTQ+. We all live within a system that seems to accept and reward those who conform to idealized gender roles and rejects or punishes even slight deviations, such as a woman wearing her hair too short or a man growing it too long. While race, sex, or disability are things we can usually perceive instantly, which is what Wilkins calls perceptual givens, gender norms are invisible. They're not something we can point to on one person. They're a shared system of expectations that we've all internalized, even if we don't fully realize it. Now, here it's really important to note how these norms interact with culture and power. For example, Wilkins explains that some Black girls tend to avoid sports or express an aversion to phys ed classes, partially based on worry about sweating out their hair, a concern that's tied to the time, cost, and cultural importance of maintaining hairstyles within the Black community. Wilkins also outlines the connection of appearance and power. They outline their interpretation of the work of Judith Butler, who reminds us that gender isn't so much about who we truly are and is more about power. It's about who gets to make the rules and whose appearance fits those rules. Certain hairstyles or appearances are seen as normal or professional, and those who don't fit that mold can face ridicule, exclusion, and even loss of opportunity. So hair becomes one of the ways power is enforced. The way we wear it and how it's received can directly impact our access to respect, authority, and belonging. So when we think about hair and gender identity, we're not just talking about aesthetics. We're talking about access, expectations, and the ways power gets reinforced through even the smallest choices we make and how we show up in the world. Just for a short personal case study here, on this slide, you'll see this is my brother Eli, and while he was in high school, he grew out his hair to be very long. He has this reddish, quite curly hair, and he grew it out for many years, and it became a part of how he saw himself, and even bigger, a part of how others saw and interpreted him. Now, what's funny about this is before he grew out his hair, my mom talks about how she had a lot of thoughts previous to this about long hair on men, how she saw it as maybe a little bit rebellious, and she definitely categorized people who tend to wear their hair like this. Now, I see this as likely a product of maybe her upbringing, her culture, the time period she was growing up in, as more than a judgment. But I remember she said to me after Eli grew out his hair like this, she said, "I realized that lots of boys are just really nice boys who also want to have long hair." I think that statement speaks volumes into how our own judgments and perceptions of what hair symbolizes and signifies, especially about gender identity and even personality, can change and adapt over time, and how important it is to be conscious of these biases, judgments, or stereotypes that we function with so that we can more clearly see the people around us. Hair can also carry deep spiritual meaning, especially for individuals of certain religious identities. For many Muslim and Jewish women, the decision to cover their hair isn't just about modesty, it's tied deeply to faith and identity. In many Orthodox Jewish communities, married women cover their hair as a sign of modesty using a sheitel or a wig, a scarf or a tickle, a bonnet, beret, or other forms of head covering. Many Muslim women choose to cover their hair with a hijab, especially in the presence of non-related adult men. While in some countries like Iran and Afghanistan, wearing the hijab is legally required, In other spaces, such as some schools in France, wearing religious symbols such as the hijab has been banned. This highlights how hair, in the context of religious practice, becomes more than just a personal or spiritual choice. It becomes a marker of identity that is regulated by society in different ways throughout time. When a woman wears a hijab, she is often immediately read as Muslim, and that visibility can affect her ability to access certain spaces, opportunities, or even rights. This again reminds us that hair and the regulation and policing of hair practices can be associated with broader systems of power, like we talked about when discussing gender identity. Hair becomes not only a symbol of religious and spiritual identity, but also a way that identity is regulated by broader systems of power. In both traditions, covering the hair is often a visible sign of religious commitment, and in some cases, other indicators such as marital status. In the study referenced on this slide by Lowenthal and Saleem, they interviewed 5 adult Muslim women and 5 adult Jewish women and extracted themes that came from their conversations based on a set of questions. The study identified multiple themes that emerged from these conversations, the first theme being identity and the third theme being spiritual and religious feelings, which are both of particular relevance in the conversation for this slide. In these conversations, one Muslim woman described the hijab as a way to identify herself as Muslim, not to prove anything to others, but because the hijab represents Islam and should be worn with sincerity. Similarly, a Jewish woman described wearing a wig or a sheitel as an important and sometimes challenging part of living in accordance with Jewish law. In both cases, the act of covering is about more than just following rules. It becomes a way of managing identity and signaling to both oneself and others that spirituality is a central part of their life. For many women, this decision is deeply emotional and meaningful. Some described feeling more connected to God, more in control, or more committed to living a faithful life. One woman said wearing the hijab makes her more aware of God on a daily basis. Another described the mystical sense of peace and purpose that came with observing Jewish hair covering laws. Head or hair covering also marks key life transitions. For Muslim women, it's often associated with reaching puberty. For Jewish women, with getting married. These visible practices shape how others perceive their maturity, faith, and values, even without a conversation. What's clear here is that hair in these contexts becomes a sacred symbol, not just an aesthetic choice, but a deeply personal and also public expression of who someone is, what they believe, and how they want to live. In thinking about hair and its connection to identity, as we've discussed race, gender, religion, and culture, I also started reflecting on how hair plays a role in personal transformation. We often hear about women in particular cutting or dyeing their hair after a breakup. It's basically become a cliche at this point, but it's one that's rooted in something real, the desire to mark a new beginning, to let go of something painful, or to reclaim a sense of control. I've also seen stories of brides who cut their hair between their wedding ceremony and reception to surprise their guests and start their marriage with a fresh look. Or women preparing for motherhood who cut their long hair into what they call a mom cut. These changes are often more than practical changes. They're symbolic acts. In moments of transition, changing our hair can become a sort of ritual, almost a ceremony, where a physical act reflects an internal shift that we're feeling. It seems that those who do this are seeking for a way to tell the world, I'm not who I was before. In this way, hair becomes a tool for navigating an evolving identity, whether it's stepping into a new life phase, recovering from loss, or redefining person identity on your own terms. Changing your hair can be a form of personal identity expression. In changing hair, sometimes we are trying to reflect an inner change that we've already felt, and other times it's used as the first step in signaling to oneself that we desire a change. Sometimes it feels like we're seeking to use this external expression to help us to feel that shift internally as well. So, to conclude, hair is both a reflection of identity and a powerful tool in the process of discovering identity. It can represent our culture, our beliefs, our gender, our race, and it can also mark moments of change, growth, or even resistance. But because of how closely hair is tied to identity, it can also affect our ability to access certain spaces, roles, or forms of power. Hair is often the subject of judgment, stereotyping, or even discrimination. And all of this impacts how we see ourselves and how we are seen by others. In this way, hair is more than the stuff that sits on top of our head, or the lack of hair on top of our head. It plays a meaningful role in shaping our person identity and in our perception of accessibility and fit, thus determining how we navigate society around us.